Hi, and welcome to this courage session with Texas A&M University College of Medicine. We're really excited to have you today. Again, my name is Enrique Hasso. I'm the Associate Director of the Texas Health Education Service. I'm really excited to have with me not just a great friend and mentor, but an amazing colleague altogether, Mr. Filo Maldonado. Mr. Maldonado, would you mind telling us about your role at Texas A&M College of Medicine?
Of course, yes. Yeah, my name, Filo, is short for Filomeno and Maldonado. I'm the Associate Dean of Admissions for the College of Medicine and been in that position for about 25 of my 32 years with the College of Medicine. And so that's my role there. I not only manage the admissions process and have a staff of have staff of 7, and but also manage enrollment as well and work with the Health Science Center in managing our enrollment from year to year.
So just before we started going live, we were talking about some of the big changes that have happened, and we'll definitely get to those in
Sure.
regards to how changes from COVID-19 have affected the admissions process at Texas A&M. But I do want to remind everybody that's watching us live that this is a live Q&A. Mr. Maldonado is here to take any and all of your questions related to admissions to Texas A&M University College of Medicine. And we are taking questions from both the Texas Health Education Service page on Facebook and the TMDCS page on Facebook. So please send in your questions, and we are glad to answer them from now over the next hour. And we do have a few questions that I do want to ask. First and foremost, would you mind walking us through what just a quick overview of some of the changes that have happened in regards to how COVID-19 has affected the admissions process at Texas A&M?
Sure. Unlike my colleagues at our sister institutions across the state and many across the nation, it's been a challenge. I mean, the fact that we're not going to be able to conduct live interviews and bring in our applicants to our facilities is indeed a change. And having to adapt to a virtual approach is obviously not only challenging, but there are a lot of details involved. And there's obviously the potential as well for mishaps, over the course of that time. So we have to think about potentially what could happen and be ready to address, an issue if it should come up. But so that's one of the most important things is preparing ourselves, obviously, for a virtual approach to evaluating candidates. Obviously, some of the other things that have surfaced over the course of the last several months is how undergraduate institutions are also adapting, of course, to COVID-19 in terms of online coursework, pass-fail, and then the impact, of course, of testing, MCAT, and so on. So given all those issues, admissions committees across the state and across the nation have begun to exercise flexibility in terms of how they're going to review their applicants. Meaning that that we're going to look at the record, obviously, in terms of what they've already accomplished. The pass-fail is, I don't think that is really going to be an issue, just given the circumstances. We understand that institutions are going to be doing it across the board. And in terms of the MCAT, what we decided to do, given that tests have been canceled and others have been rescheduled and timeline has been extended. So we've extended our timeline as well so that we could accommodate for those students that are obviously going to have to test later because of cancellations. So we've added 4 more sessions to our traditionally 20 interviews over the course of an interview season, and into January and into February as well to accommodate for those students. And along with that, of course, we as medical school deans have decided that we're going to also move the match, and that would also extend the opportunity for additional offers through the pre-match period. So I think those are significant, changes moving forward, and not to mention the fact that we're going to look exercise flexibility with applicants who are obviously applying a little bit later, given the circumstances, especially with regard to letters of evaluation that might be coming in a little bit later, because obviously faculty are impacted by this as well. So those are some of the more, I think, just in a nutshell and in summary, some of the things that I think we all have done, to accommodate our applicants, this season. But obviously that hasn't begun yet. So once we hit the ground running, I'm sure some issues will come up, and we're going to have to adapt to that. And we're going to make note of these things so that looking back, what did we have to do, to accommodate, for students. Because we don't know how long this is going to go. This could go well into the year and even next year. Interesting times, obviously.
Yeah, and I think you really bring up a great point about how significant all of these changes are. When we think about how other big changes have been implemented for the admissions process, issues or concepts like the new MCAT, that took about 4 or 5 years to be able to fully grasp what the impact would be on admissions, and figuring out what the new norm was and figuring out what those ranges would look like, and other initiatives like holistic review, and now we're talking about, now we're going to accept this and we're going to make changes to how pass-fail courses are going to look like. And these are really, really significant changes that have happened in a very short period of time. So I think that really speaks to the level of adaptability that the schools have exhibited. I think applicants out there should really take some time to really recognize how significant these changes have been. We did have a question asking about the MD Plus program. We will definitely get to that later in this discussion. But first off, we want to kind of ease into the overall exploration of the Texas A&M College of Medicine. One of the things that's probably the most unique, I think, is the use of the campus tracks, where students move on to a different campus for clerkship training. Would you mind walking us through what that process looks like?
Sure. Well, I suppose in some ways we're unique in the state of Texas. Not that other schools don't use other clinical affiliates across the state, but the reason it's unique to us is because our institution is based in Bryan College Station, and Bryan College Station doesn't have the capacity, for example, to train clinically 175 to 200 students. So it just makes sense that we partner with clinical institutions that can allow us then to train students, or a body of students of that size. So initially our partnership with, and still exists today, is with Baylor Scott & White, which for 120 plus years was Scott & White, located in Temple, Texas. So that was our initial partnership. And from there, we've expanded obviously to Houston and now Dallas. When Scott & White merged with the Baylor system, obviously then that included all of the Baylor system institutions or clinical institutions, which are now Baylor Scott & White. So not only are we training students there in Temple with Baylor Scott & White Central, but obviously in Dallas and when many of its clinical affiliates, and then as well in Bryan College Station. Now we have 3 hospitals. We've always had 3 hospitals there in Baylor Scott & White and St. Joseph, and then at one point it was the College Station Medical Center, but St. Joseph's bought them out and is now part of the St. Joseph system. So our students rotate there. So in essence, what happens is that students have a pre-clerkship experience of 18 months. So when we select a class, an incoming class, a proportion of all the students converge in one location to do their pre-clerkship training, which is in Bryan College Station at our Health Science Center and our facilities there where the College of Medicine resides. We're just a little bit west and south of the main campus at A&M. And so when students converge there, then at some point after 12 months, then some students will then are distributed to 3 other campuses. A, and for example, a cohort of students will then go to Temple to continue with their pre-clerkship training, and then they'll transition there into their clinical training. Another proportion of the class will then go to Dallas and train at Baylor University Medical Center and its clinical affiliates. They'll continue with the pre-clerkship training there. So 6 more months, just as they do in Temple, and then transition into their clinical years. Then a proportion of, and then the other half of the class basically is in Bryan College Station. So a proportion of students will stay there and do all 4 years. And then the NMed students will also continue with their pre-clerkship training in Bryan College Station before they transition to Houston Methodist at the Texas Medical Center for their clinical training. And then a proportion of the students in Bryan College Station then will transition to Houston Methodist Willowbrook and continue with their clinical training there. So how is that determined? Well, after we have a class, after the match, for example, we then communicate with the incoming class, make them aware of all of the campus designations, which I've delineated already. Then they have an opportunity to do a campus tour of each and also meet with each of the deans virtually. So they're going to have like a virtual tour, and then they'll have a presentation by each of the campus deans to kind of give them a little bit more insight about the resources and the opportunities that are available at each campus, so the students can make a more informed decision about which of the 4 campuses would be their choice. So they then rank them in order. Then we ask them to provide a justification for their top choices or choice. They submit that, and then we have a committee that reviews all their preferences and justifications, and then we determine where students are going to go after their 12 months or after their 18 months, to continue with their training. Now, the reason that we have a committee to do that is because some of the campuses are preferred more than others, and typically those are Houston and Dallas, which makes sense. Once they start exploring all of the campuses, then we see some change of hearts there, because then they begin to see all of the opportunities that are there, and they realize, oh, Temple is not as bad as I thought it would be. Bryan College Station is not as bad as I thought it would be. Given all of the information that they're given. But when they spend those first 12 months there, they acclimate, to our culture as an institution. The students bond, obviously, at that point. The only exception are the NMed students, because they do all 4 years in Houston, as opposed to, doing their pre-clerkship and then transitioning there. The students who are going to do their training at Willowbrook do all of their pre-clerkship, obviously, in Bryan College Station before they transition here. So we typically inform the students after they have about a month to 6 weeks to kind of explore the campuses. Before COVID-19, students could actually visit those campuses and do like a second look, meet with our students, tour the facilities, talk to the dean. But this year we couldn't do that, obviously, so everything was done virtually. But the students nevertheless made those decisions, submitted their preferences, and we selected and eventually selected students into their preferences right around May, early part of May. And so they knew at that point where they were going. And so there is an opportunity once you enroll as you approach the end of the first year for students to request a campus switch. They're not obviously, there's no guarantee that could happen, but there are opportunities for students to do that. And spaces are limited, but that's certainly another option if a student doesn't want to be in the preferred, the location that they were designated. The other thing that's important to know is that we make a really concerted effort at giving students their first and second choices, or their first or their top 3 choices, as opposed to giving them their, their lower preferences.
Right.
So this year, 80% of the students got their top two choices, which is, I think, indicative of and reflective of the effort put on by the committee to really take into consideration the students' justifications for wanting their first and second choices.
There's so many great opportunities depending on the different campuses and the interests of each one of the students and the availability of different tracks that they'd be able to experiment with in the clerkship. We have a follow-up question on that just came up. Are there opportunities for rotations abroad?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's been, and that's not unique anymore across medical schools. So yes, there are, but again, the focus, and most of that happens in the fourth year because there's a considerably more flexibility in the fourth year than there is in the third year. Third year, you're going to be really immersed in learning how to become a doctor, doing those rotations, working through those clerkships that are particularly important. There is opportunity even within the third year to do a clerkship at any one of our campuses. But in the fourth year, you have approximately 20 weeks of electives, which can take you anywhere across the state or nation, and even across the world. And we connect you with physicians, obviously, and with some of our former students and alum, across the state and across the nation and even worldwide, who are committed to doing global health kind of experiences. So those aren't unusual at all, and we promote that. And most of our students have been at places like the Dominican Republic and Haiti, Central and South America, and even in the continent of Africa, and Nigeria, for example, Kenya, and even South Africa. So
the network is really wide.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And again, it's not unique. Many of our sister institutions across the state will offer those opportunities to students. You can't do very many of them, obviously, because your training is important, obviously, and getting that exposure is good, but you're not going to be able to do a whole year off. Now, you could ask for maybe a leave of absence just to do a year-long kind of a externship, somewhere abroad. But it has to be approved, obviously, and it has to go through, a certain, bureaucracy before, you're given that opportunity. But more often, students take advantage of opportunities to do externships nationally more than they do internationally, because that's pretty much a standard. Students can go anywhere across the nation, to broaden their clinical skills and their training.
Yeah, not to mention the networking for potential placement into residency positions.
Right, precisely, yes.
Yeah. Well, we've alluded to some of the special programs that Texas A&M has. We've talked about a little bit about MD Plus and NMed. Would you mind walking us through first NMed, and then we can dig into the MD Plus programs?
Yeah, NMed is really unique because not that other schools haven't dabbled into training engineers to be MDs. That's not unusual, but to train engineers or students with engineering backgrounds or computer science with an interest in innovation, like device innovation or medical technology in some capacity. So what we've come up with, we created what we call a tripartite, relationship with the College of Engineering and A&M, which is a highly ranked engineering institution. Obviously Methodist, which is the #1 hospital system in the state of Texas and ranked among the top hospital systems in the nation. And then our College of Medicine. So we bring all three partners together to create or to develop a physician that has the mindset of the caring, competent, clinician, and then the mindset of a creative and highly resourceful engineer. When you bring the two together and you meld them together, we came up with a term called physicianeer, basically. But the idea here is that this physician can not only practice medicine in the traditional way, but also can do research in device innovation, can work with device companies, partner with them, particularly have a creative idea that could, again, move forward, a particular procedure or an instrument that may perhaps be a breakthrough in how you might, conduct, a particular, surgical, procedure, any number of opportunities. So what we've done is created a program that will bring the two curriculums together. So students will earn the MD in 4 years, and at the same time, an interdisciplinary degree, an MS in engineering. So that way we can draw students from all engineering backgrounds, not just biomedical engineers. So some applicants think that this is perhaps very narrowly focused on biomedical engineers, because that obviously the typical training of a biomedical engineer dabbles into physiology and into the biological sciences to some degree. But we have students that are electrical, mechanical, chemical, and even petroleum and civil that have joined the class. But they bring their creativity and their resourcefulness and their problem-solving skills, to bear when they're training as an MD student. So the program basically brings those two things together, and it's accomplished all in 4 years. So it's highly intense. And so we already know how intense an MD degree is, clearly. So then you throw in a thread here over the course of 4 years of engineering coursework that they have to do. Before they can graduate, they bring together a portfolio of innovation, basically. This portfolio is like, and the portfolio may be so robust depending on the student or students, because you don't have to do this individually. You can do this collaboratively as a group. But you have to invent something before you can actually earn your MD degree at the end. So it would be very similar to a PhD student. Before they can graduate the PhD, you've got to defend your dissertation, or the same with an MS degree, you have to defend your thesis. Or if you're doing a capstone, let's say you're getting a degree in business. So the important thing is you have to then demonstrate, that your creativity and resourcefulness is reflected in a product of some sort or a device, and that in the end, you're going to have to defend, the use of this device or this invention, whatever you come up with, to your faculty, just as you would defend, your thesis. So this portfolio then is something that the student will develop over the course of 4 years. So at the end of their 4 years, they have this portfolio that they can present when they're applying to residency, or if they're applying for a staff position once they complete residency, or maybe are seeking employment, with a startup company or with a device company somewhere at the Texas Medical Center, anywhere in the country. Then they have this excellent portfolio that they've collected over 4 years, and then some as they're going into their residency training, for example. So some of the questions we get by applicants, is, can I do a residency, or not? And the point is, yes, you have to do a residency. You want to be a physician, you want to go into postgraduate medical training. They think that once you get, this dual degree, that's the end of it, and then you go right into device research. That's not necessarily the case. What we want to do is produce a physician that is a board certified physician in whatever specialty you decide to do. Whether that's at the primary care level or the more specialized, doesn't really matter. And we think by having this kind of experience, both a graduate and MD experience, and building on that portfolio through research and working closely with companies within the Texas Medical Center, because there's an entrepreneurship piece with this, then we believe that they're going to be highly competitive for their choice of residency. And we're hoping, we believe, given what we're putting them through, that most of these students are going to get into their number one or their top choice of residency in the end because they're just that good.
Mm-hmm. How many spots are available for that program?
We started off with 25 for the inaugural class, and for this entering class, for this next class, this is 2020, it's 35. So for 2021, we're looking now at 50, and that's where we'll cap. So the class will never get any larger than 50. And that's because there's a collaborative part to it that's very important. Students, as most engineering students, those who are online probably understand this, you've got to work in small groups. We have a space where, they work together in teams, to come up with solutions to important issues. So we present them with real case situations that, and we want them to look at these cases in a very creative sort of way, in a problem sort of way. So how will we fix this? Here's the problem, okay? These are the issues related to this problem. How would you make it better so that we can then give physicians a new approach, a new technique, a device that might actually help, perhaps either reduce pain, the time that maybe a patient may have to spend in the hospital, or perhaps even bring about the treatment or get through treatment at a faster rate. All those things, that physicians have to consider given, whatever treatment plan they have put in mind. Right. But anyway, the point being that it's very application based, and the curriculum has been adapted that way so that they're looking at real cases every day as they go through the curriculum. That's
problem-based learning, is that correct?
Problem-based and team-based learning. So both PBL and TBL, very important. The TBL is particularly important because really emphasize the importance of working together, collaborating with each other, and having those kinds of important discussions. And then the research that goes with that and the resources that we're going to make available for them so that they can begin to explore all the possible solutions to a problem.
Yeah, and we widely see how the medical field in particular is really embracing kind of an interprofessional practice now. And so that's a really important skill set for students to have. So before we dig into MD Plus, I do want to mention that our feed is filling up quickly with thumbs up and howdies, as is expected. but
thank you, that's great.
Yeah. But now digging into the
love out there still, that's good.
Right, always from Aggies. So now digging into the MD Plus program, what kind of options do students have on behalf as part of that?
Yeah. The way that works for us is that first you have to be accepted to the College of Medicine to be considered for the MD Plus, but you can express interest in any of our MD Plus options right at the time that you're applying. The secondary application, I am interested, and then we give you the listing of the MS or the master's degrees that you have a choice of. So a student can pursue MD Plus Masters in Public Health, MD Plus Masters in Business Administration, MD Plus MS in Medical Sciences, or MD Plus MS in Education for Health Professionals. So those are the 4 options that are available. So if a student decides to go MPH, then of course they can, if they're accepted to the medical school and they say, and they're particularly interested in doing MPH in combination with the MD, then the student can exercise a couple of options. So there are a couple of pathways in which they can do the coursework for the graduate degree. One option would be that they would defer their first year of medical school. So let's say, for example, students applying now for entering class of 2021, they get into the MD Plus MPH program. After we've accepted into the MD program, they'll defer their entry into medical school in 2021 until 2022. So what they'll do in 2021, essentially in 2022, is do all the coursework for the MPH degree in advance of the MD degree before they actually embark on their MD degree. So that's one option. We also have scholarships available for students that go MD plus that could basically take care of the cost of the entire graduate program, at least for some. For the MBA, it's a little bit more expensive. It's typically about 2.5 times more the cost of a typical graduate degree, like an MPH or an MS degree. But at least that can defray some of the cost of that program. So for that first year, then if you decide to defer, then you just devote yourself to doing the graduate work for that degree. And then provided you do well, because the condition is that you do well in the program and that you get through the program and earn and complete the degree, and then you enroll into medical school. So we reserve your seat, for you that following year. The other option would be you start medical school in 2021 and then defer, or rather not interrupt your medical education at the end of your 3rd year and after step 1 and step 2. So then you do all the coursework between your 3rd and 4th year, and then resume your medical education in the 4th year after you've completed the coursework. And then, so now, although you complete the coursework at either point, whether it's before or sometime after your 3rd year, you may not be able then to defend the thesis for one of the degrees or the capstone for the MBA during the year. You could probably do some of the research. So what you'll do once you enroll, let's say, for example, after you defer, then you could spend some of that time during your breaks to do the research necessary to generate your thesis. In your senior year, typically students will then take some of that time in their senior and some of their elective time and some of their vacation time to finish out their thesis and defend their thesis. And so typically then when they graduate with an MD degree after 4 years, they're also going to graduate with an MS degree or an MBA degree. So they'll earn both degrees. So you can do it. So you're going to do it over 5 years instead of over 4 years, obviously, because you're going to either take a year off in the middle somewhere, or you take the year before you enroll to do the coursework. So it's not an integrated program like NMed where you can do all, the 2 degrees in 4 years. Instead, you're going to add a year to do the coursework, but you're looking at a 32 to 36 hour degree program condensed into 1 year. And to do an MBA in that period of time is unique and unusual, because typically those are 2 to 2.5 years long and expensive. So some of the cost has been, reduced for this in this case and for our program. And then of course, we have scholarships available, not for all the students that enroll, but we do our best, to award scholarships to most of the students that enroll into our program. And those scholarships can range anywhere from $3,000 to $8,000, which can defray some of the costs of the graduate program.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for those insights.
Okay.
We've got some follow-up questions that have come up, and I want to make sure we get to those. The first one has to do with the residency programs that graduates from the MDMS, part of the MD Plus, or EDHP programs might be placed into.
Yeah, I think what the advantage that students have with an extra degree and the MD degree, and this is something that the MD Plus really emphasizes when they're marketing their program, is that makes you more competitive in the residency match process. It's not unusual for residency program directors to look at applicants to their residency program beyond just what you did in medical school in terms of grades and of course on USMLE. They also want to see how, what have you done to broaden your learning experience once you were there? They're also looking for how active you were while you were in medical school. Leadership roles within the school, your work out in the community through kind of an in-service kind of experiences with student organizations, outreach of some sort. things like that that they're looking at. And when you have a graduate degree then on top of the MD degree, um, that gives them obviously some insight into not only the strength of your ambition, but obviously your commitment and your focus and your ability to manage information effectively and efficiently, which is important because once you get into residency, you're going to be, it's a whole other level of training. And if you think medical school is difficult, wait till you residency. You're presented with a whole lot of a host of challenges that, not to mention the fact that you're going to be responsible for patients, for their treatment, for their well-being, their lives. So things can get pretty complicated.
Exactly.
So our students, those with that are in the MD Plus program, are getting in. All of them so far. We've had 100% rate of matching into their residency. So that's important to know that students who go through these dual degrees are matching into their residencies at a very high rate. So I think that's a testament to the fact, to the students' skill set, obviously, and their obvious tenacity and kind of a stick-to-itiveness, if you want to use that term. When they commit to something, they see it through, and their work ethic is obviously very, very strong. And that quality of delayed gratification is obviously very important here, because you're having to add an extra year of training, to get that extra degree, which puts out, your residency a little further out there. But if you're willing to do that because you know that this additional training is going to give you an edge in the way you're going to treat your patients, then that's something that they look at with great interest.
Agreed. Well, shifting gears a bit from the tail end of medical school to the very beginning end of medical school, I want to talk about kind of the different characteristics that Texas A&M in particular looks into, and then segue into a discussion about holistic review, because I know that you were involved in being one of the pioneers in implementing holistic review. So I definitely want to ask that question. But before we get there, I do know that Texas A&M has a very specific set of values that are implemented in the review of applications. And I believe even one of the secondary application questions has to do with the specific traits listed by the Texas A&M system. Would you mind going over those really quickly?
Absolutely. Yeah, our core values are of particular importance to us, and they're embedded in our holistic review process. Obviously, as you know, the three important dimensions of holistic review are first experiences. The experiences that the applicant brings to the whole process. And then secondly, the attributes that they bring along with those experiences. So many times the experience gives us some insight into how they're exercising those important attributes. And then lastly, metrics. So those are the three dimensions of holistic review. And in that order, basically. So when you approach holistic review, the first thing that we hone in are the breadth and depth of the experiences that the applicant brings. Hence the importance of, the activities section, obviously, of the application, where you begin to list out all the things that you've done, leadership activities, your healthcare exposure and activities, obviously, your community service, even employment, factors into this. Even your leisure activities are important to us because they give us some sense of what your interests are, how you take care of yourself, and other, dimensions of your life that are important, like music or athletics and so on. So the important thing then is, so our core values are really very simple. And you can remember by using the term RELIS. The first one would be respect. And think about how important that is in your relationship, not only with your fellow students and your faculty when you're a medical student, but obviously the respect that you're going to demonstrate or manifest in your relationship with your patients. And then After that, excellence is obviously another important, value and attribute. And we hope to see that in your experiences, in the things that you've done that demonstrate excellence, either in a research capacity, in an employment capacity, in a volunteer capacity, you name it, in an academic, capacity. Then leadership would be the other important core value. We believe that an important aspect of a physician is leadership, not only leadership within, the profession itself, within their practice, but obviously even in the community, to what extent, that physician is extending their skill set and their knowledge, expertise into the community. So an important dimension of your training at our medical school is to continue to promote leadership. That's never forgotten. That's something that's key in your development as a physician. So you have respect, excellence, leadership, and then next is integrity. So think about the importance of that. And as you know, unfortunately, we have physicians that don't live up, to that important value, and that's unfortunate. And so integrity means that you're true to yourself, that you can abide by a set of rules, and as you know, medicine is very rule centered. Obviously for the protection of the patient and the profession. If you don't do things right, there's always that risk, that someone is going to get hurt and hurt very seriously, if not end up, dead in some way. But also integrity in terms of how you deal with issues, and that in doing the right thing. And sometimes, unfortunately, people may resort to doing things that can jeopardize their integrity. So it's important over the course of your training that that a student exercise professionalism, and that's something that is very important over the course of your experience as a medical student. Because hopefully what that will carry over into your training as a resident and ultimately as a physician, that you never forget, the values that have been instilled in you in doing the right thing, not only by your patients, but by, your profession as well. And then finally, selfless service. So we hone in on what you do for others, and we try to hone in on how sincere or genuine desire is to help others. That it's not just this, it's not just about, reporting all the things that you've done, but really expressing to us, how valuable that experience was in your own personal growth and development. Sometimes I think some applicants aren't extrapolating far sufficiently enough, under those experiences, or perhaps they're too self-centered, that they can't see beyond themselves. So when it comes to selfless service, it is about making sacrifice, and it is about putting others ahead of yourself. That's not easy to do today, especially in our society where there's a lot of emphasis on me or I or you, and this is why collaboration is such an important, aspect of your training and working with others in interprofessional education. How you're going to interact with nurses or pharmacists or public health students or public health professionals, and think about how important that is today, especially our public health today, since public health is in jeopardy right now because of COVID-19. And unfortunately, our public health system, both nationally and statewide, is suffering a little bit because they don't get paid sufficiently enough. Unfortunately, they don't have the personnel perhaps to do everything that we do. And yet they're working so hard to keep us safe under the circumstances. So being able to work in that, kind of environment is important. So selfless service is a key dimension for us. So all of these important values are part of our process. So then we look at the application to see how these are being exercised. So in conjunction with that, Enrique, we're also looking at the 9 core competencies that the AAMC has also developed, and that most medical schools, if not all of them, in some way incorporate, in their holistic review process. For example, service orientation, social skills, cultural competence, teamwork, oral communication, ethical responsibility to yourself, to others, reliability, dependability, resilience, adaptability, capacity for improvement. So all those 9 core personal competencies are particularly important in our holistic approach to reviewing applications. And so we see a lot of these demonstrated across any number of experiences and activities. In the TMDS application and even the AMCAS application, I think do a very good job of allowing students to really highlight those things. So then it's particularly important or significant then for the applicant to do a really good job of documenting or reporting these activities and how those activities in some way help them, to grow and develop as a good human being.
Yeah, excellent. Well put. And kind of exploring the theory of the genesis of holistic review is really helpful. But if I could kind of flip it into this is why an advisor tells you to reflect on your experiences. This is why you should keep a journal of your experiences and really take the time to acknowledge how everything that you're seeing in your shadowing experiences or volunteer experiences or really any activity, how those are impacting your desire to pursue that career. This is why it's important. It's because if you can explain that well enough in your application, the schools are better equipped to use your arguments in your favor while using holistic review. And so it's all connected. These ideas didn't just come out of thin air.
And there's no, you have to bear in mind in this whole process that, we're dealing with individuals in each with their own, very unique and personal experiences. And so, and we value that and we respect, what applicants bring. But we also have noticed in our review of applicants that some are coming in with very shallow experiences. It's not that they don't have the desire to do this. We can sense that desire in their personal statement, but it's more than just just having the desire. It's actually manifesting that desire through action, through activity. So, sometimes we'll read personal statements that are very compelling and about that desire, and that's good. The motivation's there, but then when you start looking at activities, it's really, really shallow. So there's some inconsistency there. So it's not unusual then in many instances that medical schools may not go any further at that point. The desire's there, the motivation's there, but the experiences or the activities don't seem to demonstrate, that desire yet. And so in some instances, some students may have to take a few months off or even an entire year, in some cases even more, to build on those experiences. And in some instances, we're not questioning, the desire, but more often what's lacking is experience. So again, that's an important dimension. And most schools are now approaching, the review holistically, and that's that first dimension of review. It's experience. Mm-hmm. So, gotta be.
And we could definitely get into an entire other courage session just talking about holistic review. But for those of you that want to kind of explore this idea a little bit further, the AAMC has some amazing resources available around the core competencies, not just listing and defining what the core competencies are, but also in application, looking through sample applications and saying, well, here's how they exhibited cultural competence. Here's how resilience is exhibited. And they'll list out a good amount of examples from sample applications and then show how the different core competencies are implemented. So I really encourage you all to take a look at those, and we'll definitely include a link in the video or on the podcast if you're listening on there, so you can explore those options, because there's some really great resources available, and it's almost exactly what the schools are already doing. So it really benefits you to kind of understand how that works. We have about 10 minutes left in the session. We have a few questions that have come up, and I want to make sure we get to those. The first one is regarding veterans who are applying to medical school. The question specifically how the Texas A&M School College of Medicine works with the Department of Veterans Affairs. This person says, veteran healthcare is my driving force behind pursuing medicine. I'm hoping to be accepted into a school that works closely with veterans.
Yeah, that's important to us because one of our areas of excellence is military medicine. Not only do we want to promote students to pursue careers in military medicine across the three branches of the service: Air Force, Navy, Army, but also, of course, taking a look at those who have served and are returning to school and subsequently want to to apply to medical school. We are in the process of developing a Department of Military Medicine and are in the process of identifying and eventually hiring our first chair of our Department of Military Medicine.
Great.
We're also working closely with Texas A&M University's Office of Veterans Affairs. So A&M for many years, as you know, because of its legacy with the Corps and its focus on producing or generating young people, the next generation of officers across the branches of the service. They have a very active office to help veterans that are returning to school, and A&M in particular, to do their undergraduate coursework and working with them. So now we're working closely with that office to help identify students, veterans at A&M that may have an interest in pursuing professional education, either at our dental school, at our medical school, our school of public health, or even nursing for that matter. And then once, we've also partnered, again, in an attempt to draw students into military medicine careers with the Corps of Cadets. So we have developed an early assurance program for students who are in the Corps who have an interest in pursuing specifically a career in military medicine. Now, not everybody that's in the Corps wants to go into, into medicine, obviously. And some don't necessarily want to go into military medicine, but there is a cohort of students that we recruit every year that are interested particularly, in military medicine. We've also partnered with each of the three service academies, the Air Force Academy, West Point, and the Naval Academy. And our goal is to develop, in fact, we've already done so, kind of a pipeline with those institutions, again, to enroll those students, not only into NMED, because some of them are coming from engineering backgrounds, because as you know, the service academies are really big on engineering, but also those who are interested in pursuing military medicine. So each of those service academies every year have a number of billets, that they can fill to pursue medicine as a career. And so we're working closely with their advisors so that we can identify some of those students who may be interested in doing their medical training at our institution versus any of the others nationwide. So those are some of the initiatives that we've embarked on, again, not only to draw veterans as applicants, to our medical school, but as well, to um, enroll them. So our average enrollment of veterans to our medical school is about 4%. We want to get that up to about 10%, but we just need a larger cohort of veterans actually applying. So there are not very many of them out there applying. For us to even get 4% is really amazing. I mean, we've had students from former Marines, of course, Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, and even those that are active duty, National Guard that are applying to medical school. We're also working closely with Veterans Affairs statewide, and we provide them with statistics every year on the applicant pool of veterans and those that we are interviewing and ultimately, enrolling. So we keep them apprised of how that pool of applicants at our medical school are progressing through, the admissions process. So, and then of course there are scholarships that are coming out of Veterans Affairs now for students who may be interested, in pursuing a career in medicine with a focus on, addressing veteran healthcare. So there's you're probably familiar with the HPSP, the Health Professional Scholarship Programs, and the 3 branches of the Armed Service. Well, Veterans Affairs has now created a similar scholarship program for students who may be interested in working specifically with veterans. So those are the things that we're doing to not only attract prospective veterans, to our medical school, but also students who may be interested in pursuing careers in military medicine across the 3 branches of the service.
Excellent, thank you. So we are getting close on time, but we still have a few questions related to the application. Would you mind sticking around for just a few minutes beyond the hour? Thank you. So the first question that we have on here is there's an applicant who's short on prerequisite hours and hasn't taken the MCAT yet. They're asking if they should go ahead and start the application process.
I suppose it would depend on what which courses are lacking, I suppose. Now, if, for example, if you have most of the coursework necessary to take the MCAT, that would mean that you have the biological sciences, you have the chemistry, you have the biochemistry, you have the physics. But maybe you're lacking English. Statistics is still important because if you haven't had stats, you're going to see it on the MCAT. So it would be good to have some background stats going before you actually take the MCAT. So that's why it's encouraged that most of those prerequisites are done before you actually take the MCAT. Now, it's not unusual if, let's say, most of us require at least 6 additional hours of biological science beyond the introductory biology. So one of those is, for the most part, can be about, for most schools, biochemistry. And that's important for you to take the MCAT. But let's say the additional 3 hours for you to fulfill the 14-hour requirement, that could be done over the course of your application, or over the course of the fall while you're interviewing. It could be a genetics course, or it could be a physiology course, or it could be a micro course. And that's fine, because you're not going to get a lot of that on the MCAT, not to the degree that you're going to get organic and biochemistry, obviously. So under those circumstances, that's fine, that you can actually apply before you have met all the prerequisites. But it would depend, how you would advise that student would depend on what they've already accomplished. Mm-hmm. If you don't have most of the biological science or even organic complete, and you're far away from even doing biochemistry, you still got a year out before you can actually apply, because it would take you about that long to finish those prerequisites.
Yeah. So another question that came in has to do with how Texas A&M is working with students who have delayed MCATs this year.
They have delayed what?
MCATs.
Okay. Yeah, what we decided to do is that, well, obviously we've all extended the deadline. Okay, so that instead of October 1st, we're looking at October 30th. And then, of course, we're interviewing a little further into the year and into next year to accommodate for those students taking later MCATs. So that means that we're going to continue then, and we're interviewing more candidates. So our number, the typical number, at least in the last couple of years for us, was between 600 and 700 candidates. Our goal this year is to interview between 800 and 875 candidates. So interviewing more, given the fact that we're going to not only because we hope to increase our class size from 175 to 200. So that's another thing we're doing, is bringing the class back up again to where we were 4 years ago. And so extending the interview period. So that means that the review process will be extended much longer. Obviously, we're going to be making the pre-match offers. We've extended that period as well. We're all doing it in Texas. So these are some of the ways that we're going to be able to accommodate for those applying, obviously a little bit later. Now, so some of those candidates that might be applying a little bit later may be getting some of those later interviews, and that's fine. It doesn't matter when you interview. The important thing is to get that interview, because that gives you a greater opportunity to be among those that we select, because we're also extending the pre-match period, and the match is also going to go a little bit later. In the event that an applicant who does interview late and maybe doesn't match or doesn't get a pre-match offer, then there's a potential then that you can be waitlisted, and then offers will continue to be made through the course of the spring. And all of the schools, in some capacity or another, it depends, will experience some attrition from their match class. It's just the reality of things, because not everybody matches into their first choice, and some are also applying out of state or into special programs. So all of those circumstances will have some impact on whether you're going to keep 100% of your class during that period. So we typically will lose, our attrition rate is anywhere between 10 and 12% of our match class. And so then we fill those remaining slots with alternates between March and May, even up to June in some instances.
So when an application arrives at the Texas A&M College of Medicine desk, virtually from TMDSAS, what's the process for reviewing them, and then how does a secondary application come into play?
Right, very good. Yes, well, for an applicant to be considered complete and ready for review, not only do they have to have a TMDS application or an MCAS application if you're applying to the MD PhD program, and if you're a non-resident applying to NMed, then an MCAS application is also, encouraged. So then the secondary application for us is required. Okay, so in addition, you have to have an MCAT score, right? You also have to have the CASPER score. So those are the, you have to, and then finally the letters of evaluation. Either they can come as individual letters, the 3 required letters with 1 extra if you wanted to submit an extra, or a committee packet, depending on how your institution approaches it. So those are the ingredients, and those are highlighted on our website too, that then completes an application, and then we're ready for review. So we've been reviewing applications since June 1. So, and that review has been pretty steady now. And we've already sent out our first, we've sent out invitations to our first cohort of applicants that we're going to interview on July the 16th. So those are out already. So we're already filling classes, and we'll be doing that on a pretty regular basis. So the secondary application is critical. If you delay that and you have all of the other pieces, then your application is basically on hold until we receive that secondary application. If you have all of those things, but you're lacking the CASPER test, then that will also delay the review of your application until such time that we have the CASPER test. If you have everything except the MCAT, then we will wait until we have an MCAT score before we review your application. I still think it's okay, and would encourage applicants, if their MCAT test date has been delayed, to submit their application with all of the other supporting documents in advance of the MCAT. Because what we will do, and I'm sure other schools will do, is they'll probably flag those students. They're complete just pending an MCAT, and given the circumstances that MCAT administrations have been delayed, then that'll help you, because everything is that will advantage you in terms of expediting the review process, because then we won't add another layer of processing waiting for all of the other documents to come in if you decide to wait until you get your MCAT score.
Right.
And that's something that you have to factor in, right, Enrique, is that once, if you wait to submit your application, it's got to go through TMDS processing, which can take hours, if not days, to be validated.
It's definitely taking days right now.
Right. And then once it's validated and at TMDSAS and finally transmitted to the medical schools, then you have to take into account the process within the medical school, which can be days, if not weeks.
Yeah.
So it's not, a snap of a finger instant. You have to account for the process itself.
Whereas having everything ready to go and just pending an MCAT score, once that's released to TMDSAS, it takes about 36 hours to get to the school.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly, and once we have that, and then we put it immediately, we go into review mode, and if you've reviewed positively, then you're going to be scheduled for an interview if that's the direction we want to go. Now, so let's say, for example, you apply in June, but your MCAT is delayed until August. We don't get the results until September. Well, don't expect to be interviewed in July and August or September, obviously, because we're still waiting for but you're reviewed and you're ready to go. And then once we get the MCAT and everything falls into place, then your interview could be in October, November, December, or even January. Mm-hmm. The important thing, of course, in that whole process is to be interviewed, because you want to be considered among those 800 applicants that we're going to consider for acceptance to get a class of 200.
And you don't send out invitations for the secondary application. It's already available to applicants who submitted, correct?
In fact, it's available right now, but what we are doing is sending reminders. So once we have an applicant in the queue, and we have they have a TMDS PIN number, and they have, then we will send out a reminder to those that are coming to us with a pending status that we have a secondary application that is required. Mm-hmm. And you can access it either through TMDSAS or directly at our website. All you have to do is check it out. It's there. The link is there. You register and you have access. It's that simple. We do have a fee of $60 though for that.
Mm-hmm. Now, back to the overall review process. If somebody already has an MCAT score and is retaking it, how does that come into play?
Yeah, I don't think we're unique in this way, that other schools exercise the same approach, but we wait until we get the latest administration of the MCAT, even though you have an existing MCAT. And many times those students with existing MCATs are retaking it because they're probably not satisfied with their score. So they're waiting, obviously, for a better score. So we are too. We want to see how well you've done on your second administration or the third administration, depending on how many times you've taken it. So we will wait then to review your application until we get the most recent MCAT.
Hmm. Now, one final question, since I know we're pretty far over on time. With regards to the interview date, could you give us a quick overview of what students might expect now that it's virtual? And then maybe any advice that you have for preparing for a virtual interview?
Okay. I think yes, we're going to communicate to you. We're going to communicate to applicants by email. Very important to read the emails that will come with instruction. Now, the way things are going to work for us is that if you're interviewing for the MD program, you're going to interview on Thursdays virtually, and so you'll get some detailed information on how that's going to work. My staff will coordinate everything, and basically we're going to put applicants into rooms, essentially, with your interviewers there. So once you're selected for that virtual interview on that day, you need to set aside that day only for that experience. You shouldn't be trying to do other things on your computer or trying to God forbid, trying to do 2 interviews simultaneously, with another institution. That would be horrible, because the applicant's attention is going to have to be focused entirely on what we're doing. We're going to have presentations during the course of the day, we're going to have a student panel as well, and then of course the interview breakouts. So for us, our interviewees will get 2 individual 25-minute interviews with 5-minute time for transition from one interview to another. Some applicants may have a little bit of a gap from one interview to the other. Now, another thing that we do differently than other medical schools is that we also introduce students to a standardized patient exercise. So rather than doing that experience during the interview day, students are going to be sent another email. They're going to fill out a Google form for us that will indicate the day that they would prefer to do the standardized patient exercise. They're going to do 2 5-minute standardized patient exercise, and students will have either Monday or Tuesday of the week that they will be interviewing. So let's say, for example, the student is interviewing July 16th. Then they would do their standardized patient exercise either on a Monday or a Tuesday of that week in advance of their interview on Thursday. And our Clinical Learning Resource Center will basically handle the standardized patient exercise experience. But we will communicate with the student and let them know that this is something that they'll have to do, and then they choose the day and the time that they want to do the standardized patient exercise. We provide that information to the Clinical Learning Resource Center, and then they will communicate with the student to tell them exactly how that telehealth experience is going to actually occur. And so they'll get 2 5-minute experiences during that week. So just something to bear in mind. And again, you don't want to be distracted when you're doing the standardized patient exercise, because you're going to actually be on a call with the patient, just like we are right now. And you will be given a scenario, and you will be presented with that scenario. You interact with that patient as if you were doing a telehealth experience as a physician or a medical student. So you'll be briefed before and so you'll have all the details as to how that's going to happen, and then you'll be presented with a scenario, and then you actually have the experience. So my suggestion to applicants who we interview is to take it seriously and be well dressed for your encounter. You will be instructed to be professionally dressed. That's the expectation. You don't want any distractions. You don't want your dog or your cat to be running around, and you don't want to be in your bathrobe. If you have people living with you, you might find a quiet place, to seclude yourself during the course of that experience.
Yeah, and don't moderate a live Q&A. Maybe that's a good one, so you don't have to look around all over the place.
That's right.
All right. Well, I really appreciate all of these great insights that you've provided our students. These are courage sessions, and they are based on one of the great quotes from Winston Churchill about, situations might change, but we can't ever give up our courage. Do you have any words of courage for our students?
Oh my goodness, words of courage. I think, very simply, I think it's important for you to be strong, to be yourself, we understand how important your ambition is, to become a physician. We want to help you accomplish that. Don't become discouraged if things don't go your way. We're here also to help, to provide advice if you need advice. Not only through TMDSAS, but we also do file reviews for applicants. We want to help you as much, as well as we can, to help you accomplish your goal. Mm-hmm. So continue to be strong. Move forward with your experiences, and think carefully about what's driving you to do this. We know it's important I think for you to articulate clearly what is driving you to do this. And we hope what's driving you is that, and what's at the center of what's driving you is that you really do care for human beings, and you really want to make a difference in their lives. If that comes across clearly to us, then we really want to get to know you better, and hopefully you'll be among those that will train at our medical school.
What a great call to action. Thank you. Well, thank you again so much for your time today, and thanks to everybody who had some great questions to guide our conversation today. And on behalf of everybody at the Texas Health Education Service, TMDSAS, and Texas A&M College of Medicine, we'd like to wish all of our applicants all the best of luck. Yeah, gig 'em. And we'll see you on our next current session, which will take place next Wednesday with UTMB. Thank you.
Thanks. Very good.